right, Chris, episode 3. I'm excited. I can't believe we're 3 weeks into this already. Season 2. It's September 19th today. This will come out on the 22nd. We're cruising.
Yes, sir. Episode 3. This season is flying by, and we're bringing you another huge guest that we're excited to bring on the show. Has a huge impact in the events industry, and we can't wait to get into all of the details with him. But before we reveal who that guest is, here comes the rain.
All right, this week, like Chris said, we have a special guest, Howard Givner. Howard wears multiple hats in the meetings and events industry, works with events and business leaders in helping them grow their business. I can't list all the things that Howard does because it's an amazingly long list, so I'm going to let Howard do that himself. Howard, tell this group about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. So I've been in the events industry my whole career. I've built and sold 3 different businesses and have advised business owners and leaders formally and informally throughout the years. The last business I sold almost 3 years ago. And over the last year, I've sort of shifted to working with owners, executives, and investors of event companies to help them grow and get to the next level, which often includes M&A, buying or selling other companies. And I work with them in 2 capacities. One, I've got a consulting practice, the Heathcote Advisory Group, and then I'm also a senior advisor at a mid-market investment bank called Oakland's. And for larger deals, I've got access to a much deeper pool of resources, and Oakland's does some great work in the space. So really, at the end of the day, people come to me or companies come to me, and they're at a certain point and they want to get to that next point. And depending on where they are in that journey, sometimes they're early stage, sometimes they're late stage, sometimes it has M&A, sometimes it's just growth strategy. So my sweet spot, so to speak, is helping owners and leaders of event businesses take their organizations to the next level.
Awesome. So you've obviously been in the industry a long time. I think in doing some research for this episode, saw you started one of your businesses in 1990. What's been the biggest change you've seen between then and now, and where is the industry going?
Well, I think probably the biggest change is the professionalization of the event service providers. I think, we've always been going to events for, humans are social creatures. We've always celebrated milestones collectively. So events are not new. The idea of an event planner, like a professional planner to organize events, really didn't exist, 40, 50 years ago. And, or it existed informally. Those events in organizations were just done by an admin or somebody working for marketing. We do a marketing event, the head of sales would have someone on his team help organize a sales conference or what have you. And, in the 90s, when I started, a lot of the challenge was proving the value of why you need somebody dedicated full-time to produce an event, whether it's a third party as an agency or in-house as a dedicated planner. And over the years, that's matured into a full-blown industry. One of the things we're still quite frankly struggling with is ROI and measurement.
Sure.
I've been beating that drum for a really long time, and we're making progress, but it's been painfully slow. One of the really interesting things in the last, let's say, 5 years or so, coming out of COVID, has been enormously increased focus on face-to-face events for a number of reasons that weren't a huge factor before. And I've spoken to a number of private equity firms that are investing in the industry, and many of whom have never invested in the space before. I spoke to one guy a couple months ago, and you look on their website and they're in like oil and gas and lumber and plastics and all these random industries. And they made their first purchase into an event business, and they love the space. They're really bullish on it. And with AI coming to prominence, there's a lot of fakes. With AI, you're not sure of the authenticity of content. Events are a very, very high source of trust. I mean, when Freeman does their survey in terms of sources of trust, face-to-face events was always at the top, and with AI, it's even higher.
Yep.
And when you break out the numbers for next-gen people, it's even higher than that. And you add to that the fact that you got distributed workforces now, and companies need to bring their teams together, and you've got digital overload, and this sense of there being a lot of uncertainty and change, and people need to come together with their people. So, in general, it's been a real pleasure to see the industry sort of grow up, for lack of a better term, over the years.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on where we are as an industry as well. I think, in the age of AI, when we don't know what's real anymore, we'll get to a point where the in-person interaction that you have might be the only thing is real. So there might be a heavy emphasis on that. Howard, we came into this episode really without an outline or where we were going to go, but you opened the door on data and ROI. And I'm curious, given the sort of theme of our podcast being Sideways Rain and the challenges, we've always had challenges here in measuring ROI from a production perspective in meetings and events. There's places to measure it all over the board, but one, customers don't want to give you survey data, and that's sort of deprecated and old as a model for getting that data. And two, there's nobody really out there doing super innovative things in the way of getting tangible, objective ROI around events. We often just say, we don't really know what the ROI is, but we know it exists. So what are the biggest challenges? Like, what is the sideways rain in this space right now as far as ROI and measurement?
So I think that when you look at where the challenges, there's two parts. ROI is a calculation, right? Well, you're investing something semi-quantifiable, whether it's typically money, time, or I think focus is a resource that is limited as well. You're allocating those things and you want to get something back. And so, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but I personally think the concept of return on experience, return on objective, this doesn't make any actual mathematical sense, right? You can't invest in objective. Your experience, what you really want to calculate is, what did we put in? What did we get out? And basically was the juice worth the squeeze? And I think if event professionals can simply understand the philosophy of that and be able to engage in a conversation with stakeholders about it, put the math aside. Because nobody gets into the event industry because they like math. They put the calculation aside, and there are ways to do it. And, there's a lot of pressures leaning in this direction, which I can get into, but just simply being able to sit down with a client and say, okay, we're spending 6 months planning this event. Here's how much the event cost out of pocket. We're not even factoring in the internal time of all the people working on this, the time our internal team is going to spend out of the office going to this event.
Yep.
Just this effort, right? We're doing all this. Is it worth it? Does it make sense? I mean, I would often sit with clients in a first meeting, and I wouldn't even get into measurement. I'd say, the event just finished. We're all in the back room. We just popped champagne. It's a home run. We're toasting the event. Tell me what just happened. Tell me, what did we see? What made it happen? And sometimes it's as simple as one guy who's, really, really important. It could be a key client. It could be a key boss or whatever, a key stakeholder, a donor, whatever. This guy's really happy and he wants to stay more engaged. It could be, it's a sales kickoff. So, everybody's really psyched and jazzed about the new products and they want to go out and sell. And I say, okay, that's great. How could we measure that? Mm-hmm. How can we measure the enthusiasm at the spot? How can we measure the sales bump, 6 months from now? But just being able to show your stakeholder that you get it. And it's not just about, did we do everything right and the event was perfectly run? If the results aren't there, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Whereas if the results are there and things go wrong at the event, you'll live to fight another day. So I think on the most critical core levels, we have to be able to have the vocabulary and the understanding to say, why are we doing all this? Like, yep. Why what do we want to accomplish here? And if we did accomplish, and this is where ROI goes into the next level. So, okay, we had this, we did a road show with our new product. We went to like 10 cities, we engaged this many people, we got these results, and maybe the results are good. But ROI is a relative comparison, right? I can invest $100,000 in Microsoft stock, and in 5 years, maybe it doubles, right? Is that good ROI or bad ROI? I don't know. It depends. If I could have put the same money in Apple stock, which has comparable risk, and it triples, then that ROI is not so good. And so it's all a relative concept. So if you go back to that roadshow where you're doing field marketing for this thing and you got good results, it's very feasible that the executive might say, that's good, but I think we could have gotten more results for the same money. Or I think if we spent less money through social marketing, we could have gotten the same result. So being able to engage in that comparative discussion, right? Is it worthwhile? And I use this as an example a lot. I moderated a panel a number of years ago at an event I did for BizBash called the Event Innovation Forum. And it was on how I pitched a new event to a CEO and pulled it off. And one of the panelists, who at the time was working at Groupon, talked about this thing. She created Camp Groupon, this whole 3-day experience. And she had a timeline that she unrolled like 10 feet. It was this really cool thing. She went through the whole process of how she got it approved, how the event did, how she measured it, and it was really successful. And I then said, so, what's it going to look like this year? And she says, well, they canceled it. I said, why? You just told me how great it was, all the results. She said it was, but for the money they spent, they could have gotten a 2x return putting that money into digital marketing or, Google ads or whatever. And so that to me is the essence of ROI, is being able to understand why we're doing this, how we know if we're successful, and then how does that compare to trying to accomplish that in another way? I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, there are tools out there, Viva Stream and Bear Analytics, and Explory does really good work.
Yep.
I was just part of an investment round that went into Explory, just for disclosure. But there are really good tools out there. And at the end of the day, they're only as good as the people willing to put the right data into it and know how to analyze that data. Because there's a lot of data out there now, and, what data is really important. But really it starts with being able to have a dialogue.
Yep.
And I think the pressure is continuing on this front because many B2B events have been traditionally under the sales team, and the sales team typically doesn't use as much data. It's very much like, how many people are handshaking and slapping hands at the bar or at the booth or whatever. A lot of that's shifting under marketing now. And the marketing people have really good data. They can look at, Facebook ads. They can look at Google Analytics. They can track open and click-through rates in emails. And they want to bring that analytics to events. So we're heading in the right direction. It's just, it's a little slow going.
No, this insight's gold. If you get a pregnant pause here, it's because I tend to talk too much, so I give Chris some space to say something. Otherwise, I'll just keep going and going.
No worries. Yeah, we can go down a rabbit hole with all of these topics. But Howard, I wanted to take a step back and just ask you, what originally drew you to the events industry? And second, what motivated you to found the Event Leadership Institute?
I started out as a club promoter on the side when I was in my 20s, and then people started asking me to help them with corporate events and things like that. And eventually, I figured out a way to make a living at it. It was very much up and down. It wasn't easy. I didn't really have a lot of peer companies to look. There wasn't a lot of data out there. There weren't a lot of courses out there. And, I kind of really winged it a little bit. And little by little, the business grew, and, we had setbacks, and then we'd grow further, and, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing over the years. And eventually we started doing some really big and pretty cool events. I sold that company in 2008 to a group out of Spain called Global Events Group. And I stayed on for a couple of years. And then when I left, I was very passionate about training people. And I'd always felt the learning curve for new hires was too long. I wasn't getting consistency in how people were being trained. I wanted to be able to level up knowledge quickly with my team. And, if I had somebody who had a background doing events at the Ritz-Carlton and we brought them on board, they were really good at venues and logistics and, food and beverage, but, maybe they're working with a client whose CEO needs a teleprompter and they don't know anything about teleprompters. How are they supposed to learn about that? And basically I built the Event Leadership Institute in the vein of, I wanted to build the products that I wanted but couldn't find as an agency owner. And so, that's what led to the, initial rollout was like a Netflix style learning library. And it was, we went early with unbundled microlearning. So, the teleprompter example, there was a 40-minute, video class on teleprompters.
Nice.
You didn't have to go into a whole AV thing. And even the teleprompter thing was that 40 minutes was designed to be cut up into 8-9 sections from the get-go. Understanding the gear, how to guide your executive, blah, 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 key takeaways. And in many ways, we were really early. No one was really doing online learning back then. The need for training and professional development was sort of a nice to have, not a need to have. But that's kind of what drove me there is, I wanted to have more readily available, user-friendly, digestible training tools. And I wanted to have more consistency in how people were trained and be able to get people trained faster. And that was sort of the impetus behind ELI. Before that, if you wanted to learn, if you want to get professional development in the industry, you had to basically go to a school, go to like NYU or, a local college and take a, professional development course like in the evenings. And I know the people who teach those courses and, it's hit or miss. Mm-hmm. But even that, the courses were on a semester basis. Mm-hmm. And, the duration was the same. They had to match with the academic credit hours. And so you're looking at, 15 hours at a shot and, it spanned 3 months and that's fine. But, that's not how people learn anymore. And so, we really tried to disrupt that mold, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And I'm sure you saw a lot of success with it. We talk about it all the time, or I say it is nobody really ends up in this industry on purpose. They just kind of end up here. And then there is a large learning curve. And when we onboard people here at 180, it does take a long time of just getting their hands dirty, like seriously 3 to 6 months of just getting their feet under them around how we work and what we do. And we've also noticed, and this has changed a little in the last 5 years, there aren't really bachelor or associate programs that even drive people towards our industry. And how can we change that? And interesting that you brought this up today, because we just spoke with Corinne Howard, who's the dean at one of the deans at Dunwoody College of Technology here in the Twin Cities. And they're recognizing that from a design perspective, they're putting together an experiential design program here. So I think folks are starting to notice the need for intentionality around design at an earlier date, but to have a tool like you put together for folks that are in the industry is just invaluable.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to go back to not specifically the ROI, but how meetings have changed and evolved towards experience design and how that gets even more pressure put on it when the economy gets tighter, which we might be seeing in the next 24 months. So you really have to justify the value of the meeting, especially when money's tight. What are you going to see? What's going to separate premium experiences from commodity style meetings in the next 24 months?
Well, I mean, I think the festivalization of events, people have been talking about that for 20 years, but I think we're finally there. And I think a few factors have combined to that. I mean, the most salient of which is just, you have a younger generation that grew up on, music festivals, or, you've got South by Southwest and Coachella and, Burning Man, like all these really creative experiences. And that's what people want. And finally, you've got, I think to me, the big, marker of this was a year or so ago when Informa acquired Essential, which owns Con and I think Money 2020. And they paid like $1.5 billion for it and used that to be the foundation for Informa festivals. And the person who was in charge of that Essential is now leading that at Informa. And you're starting to see a number of events like Future Proof, for example, which is a series of, citywide festival type thing for money managers, people in the wealth management space. And, they've got a 3-day event in Miami, and and you look at it and it's like it has a very different DNA than a 3-day conference in a convention center.
Yep.
That's not to say that all the events need to look like that. But I think people are looking for is just having really good quality experience.
Yep.
And I think that the festivalization angle is important so that, events can be more engaging and more fun. And, there's definitely been a blurred line now between the personal and the professional. And you're seeing that across a lot of areas. Like, typically it used to be you kept your politics at home and, you didn't get involved in that at work. More, very high percentages of, next gen audiences. And this comes from, I think, the is it the Bloomberg Trust Survey? No, it's not Bloomberg. What is it? There's, oh my God, it's a large ad agency or PR firm, the Edelman Trust Index. You look at that and a very large percentage of people in these next generations want to work at companies that share their values and expect their CEOs to speak out on those values. And so you've got a blend of those things. You've got a trend of blending between leisure and business travel. You've got a lot of people that are, looking to go to events where they can tack on a couple of days and have an experience for themselves or their spouses or their families. And you've got a lot of organizations that are designing events specifically to cater to that. Another factor that's a big driver is the distributed workforces. You've got companies that are very, very spread out and, remote work, distributed offices, hybrid work, and they need to bring people together for these events. And so, and you're seeing a lot of events that, like in our industry, IMEX is in a couple of weeks. There are a lot of companies that basically fly everybody in a day early and have their own retreat or their offsite or their management meetings while everybody's there.
Yep.
So, I think there's a lot of different things going on. I think at the end of the day, the event organizers that are really, really laser focused on stakeholder ROI, meaning attendee ROI, exhibitor ROI, sponsor ROI, speaker ROI, whatever, the ones who are constantly really focusing in on that are going to and react with that information and act on it. I think are going to be fine. They're going to thrive. I think the ones who don't, I think are, they're on borrowed time, so to speak.
Sure.
You still see a typical trade show, for example, the last day, somebody's always going around and say, hey, you want to reserve your space for next year. The conversation's not, how'd you do at this event? How many leads did you get? What were you here for? Awareness, cultivating existing customers. How did that go? How did that go compared to last year? How did this compare to other shows that you're at? Was it worthwhile? And then depending on how that is, all right, so it sounds like you might want to come back next year, or sounds like you'd come back next year if we could do X, Y, and Z. Those conversations still really aren't happening enough.
Agreed. And you mentioned IMEX. For the listeners out there, will you be at IMEX this year?
Yeah. I'm doing I'll be there for 3 days. The main thing I'm speaking at is SITE, the Society of Incentive Travel Executives, is having like a private C-suite for incentive agency leaders, like a C-suite forum. Tuesday, I think the whole morning. It's all full, but it's about 25 or 30 C-suite leaders of incentive agencies, and I'm doing a session on M&A there.
Yep.
And then the rest of the time I'll be there meeting with people, catching up with people.
Awesome. JR and I will be there as well, so we'll try to pop in.
Right. Let's do it. Do you guys have a booth or stand there?
We do not. That's on the schedule for next year, though. But we like to walk around and shake hands and have meaningful conversations. So we'll be all over the floor for sure.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely see you there.
Most definitely. So Howard, here on the podcast, we like to touch on some of the tough times in entrepreneurship and mainly in the events industry. So I have to ask, what were some of the toughest moments looking back at your career, and how did you overcome them? What were some of the signs that you saw? How did you get to the decisions to pivot or change? Love to hear details about that.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of those, and when I've done seminars or sessions, or I've spoken on growing a business in the industry, I typically lead with a quote of something like, "Successes are shouted from the mountaintops, failures occur in the shadows." And the reason I say that is because I always felt like everybody else had their shit together more than I did. I was the only one that struggled. And no cursing.
Oh, no. I'm saying you're not the only one.
We love cursing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we compare our insides to other people's outsides. And the reason is, you're always posting on LinkedIn, honored to be included in this, thrilled to be speaking at this, excited to welcome, 5 new hires. You don't see our key salesperson quit.
Mm-hmm.
A client of 5 years fired us. We ran an event last week and it was a train wreck. People just don't post that, but that happens. That's out there.
Yep.
That, people are struggling. It's, you're never going to see someone. I spoke to somebody last week. You'll never see a post that says, "I just took out a second mortgage on my house to fund business because 2 clients we're doing work with just completely disappeared and I'm not sleeping at night because of that."
Yep.
And so, businesses are, and just careers in general, everybody is struggling more than you think. With that said, for me, it pretty clearly I have a setback or a challenge that, will forever stand out in my life. And so that is about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I had a pretty rough battle with brain cancer. And this was in the middle of COVID. And so I had CNS lymphoma, which afflicts the central nervous system. And it started in my right eye in 2017. And 80% of the people who have that in their eye will get it in the brain within 2 to 3 years. And so I was on quarterly brain MRIs to check. Sure enough, at the 2.5-year mark, this is November 2019, it shows up and it's in the brain. And it's a very aggressive disease. Not a lot of people have it. I was treated really well at Sloan Kettering. I had the MRI on a Friday. The following Tuesday, I checked in for the first of 8 rounds of induction chemo. And every other week, I was in the hospital for an average of 5 nights. And halfway through, after the 4th round, they did an MRI of the brain and the tumor was gone.
Wow.
So I responded really well to the chemo. They continued the cycle. So I finished the end of February, early March. Because this is an aggressive disease and because it does come back, and because I responded well to the initial chemo, they recommended I go in for a second round, which is called consolidation chemo. And whereas the first part, the induction chemo, is designed to get rid of the tumor, the consolidation is designed to prevent it from coming back. So they zap your body with like nuclear level chemo in hoping of, knocking it out wherever it's lurking and it's too small to show up on a scan. So that part was basically a month I was in the hospital, May of 2020, peak COVID. For a month, I had, 8 days of these really high dose chemo, which got rid of it, but it also knocked out my immune system. So after the 8th day, I got my stem cell transplant and my entire immune system rebuilt. At one point, I was in the ICU. I picked up an infection, et cetera, all of which is backdrop to COVID turns the industry sideways.
Yep.
Right. And so, we had a business, the Event Leadership Institute was doing good, not great. We were averaging maybe 20, 25 people every time we ran a course. Education and professional development was like a nice to have, not a need to have. Online learning was, some people were into it, not everybody. And I could see where the leaves were, where the, wind was blowing. The last round, I was in the hospital before the consolidation phase. You could sort of see COVID creeping in, and I could see Facebook announces they're canceling all in-person events for 18 months. The Mobile World Congress, canceled. You had, I think the NBA canceled their parts of their season. So you could see it coming, and I like to think I'm pretty good at reading the tea leaves. And a lot of the industry, if you guys remember, particularly on the sales side, DMOs and hotels, like, we'll be back in 2 weeks, we'll be back in 2 months. It's all coming back. I'm like, no, there's no evidence to show that. If anything, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the only path forward to me at the time was virtual events. Yep. And the technology, Jerry, the technology virtual events is not new. It's been around for at least a decade. There were companies like Unisphere and Inexpo and others had built out really good, robust virtual platforms. People didn't use them.
Yep.
And I knew the industry needed to learn virtual events like yesterday. And so while I was in between rounds in the hospital and leading up to being in for a month, I worked with my team. We fast-tracked development of a training course on virtual events and launched it. I think the first cohort started like April 1st of that year.
Crazy.
So we were marketing it in March while everything was slowly shutting down. Literally built the plane while we were flying it. Went to brand, and I'm doing this in between chemo drips, and I'm, have to grapple with my mortality because, there's a certain percentage of people who die from the treatment, right? It's a very aggressive treatment, and, it knock on wood, I'm 5.5 years post-transplant, and I'm, pretty much out of the danger zone. But, I'm walking around thinking like, what if I don't come out of this? What if I go into, the hospital and I pick up COVID with literally 0 white blood cells? Right. Like you could see it on the app every day when they draw the blood. I'm like, ventilator, coffin, that's me, And so this is in the back of my head. And at the same time, I knew like this was a moment, and I put all my chip. I'm like, we're going all in on this. Like, we're investing here. We're going to develop this thing right away. We're going to, get some additional staff in. This is our moment to capitalize on it. And this was a rare inflection point where everybody had to learn how to do Zoom. They had to learn how to do Teams or Google Meet or whatever. There was no other option. You went to a restaurant and you suddenly had to use a QR code to scan. And if you remember, QR codes were sitting around for a long time. Now, restaurant menus was what got people to use QR codes. And we got people to, learn how to go on a virtual course, like an online course. And I remember talking to Brant Kruger. I think you're in Minneapolis, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So do you know Brant?
I don't know Brant.
Okay. So he's in Minneapolis. He works for IDECOM.
Okay. Yep.
IDE. Okay. But Brant had been doing a course for us on technical production. So he had a gift for taking complex technical things and distilling them into language that the layperson can understand.
Sure.
But he hadn't had a lot of experience with virtual events. And I said, can you develop this course? Like, we got to do it yesterday, and you're going to have to build it week by week while people are in the course. And he says, look, I know technology, we just haven't done a ton of virtual events. And I said, well, I have total confidence in you. You're a great teacher. You're a great explainer to people. And this is a new technology that people are probably a little bit, freaked out by. And, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And suddenly we went from 20, 25 people in a class to 500 in a class.
Wow.
And we were running this class like every other month. And this was PCMA had their digital event strategies. That didn't get updated with virtual events for 18 months. MPI didn't have anything. And, we were fast, we were nimble, we knew how to develop online courses. And so, we did that. And I guess, when you told me the concept of the show with Sideways Rain, I was like, yeah, this was my sideways rain.
You might have been upside down. Yeah.
This was a lot. And I'll tie it all together because I know part of what you want to get at this is like lessons learned and things like that. I developed 3 tenets of a philosophy that helped me navigate a very scary cancer journey where there was a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And in January of 2021, so we're 9 months into COVID, I did a state of the industry webinar that ELI ran. We had 2,500 people on or something. And it was like, here's where I think things are going. And a lot of it was a little depressing. It was like, we're in for at least another 6 to 9 months of shit right now, if not another year. We will get out of it, but it's a little more pain coming up. And I had earned a reputation for telling truth to powers, like calling it like it is and, not blowing smoke up people's asses. And a lot of my presentation was a little depressing for the people who needed you to get back in person. So if you were an agency and you could do virtual events or in-house planner and you do virtual events, you're great. If you work at the Marriott, not so good. Right. If you are working at Visit San Diego, also not so good. So a lot of those people were not happy. When I get to the end of the presentation, I said, I'm going to share with you some personal things right now that may add some context to this. And there are some philosophies I developed that help me get through those personal challenges that we can apply today. And I showed pictures of myself in the hospital. I showed pictures of myself with, tubes coming out of me in an IV. And, I showed a picture of when they hung the wrong guy's, IV on my pole, which I didn't realize until the bag was filled. I kind of was very vulnerable. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
And the 3 tenets were: 1, focus on what you can control, right? I could not control the cancer. You can't control COVID. Focus on your response. Like, I couldn't control what was happening in my body, but I can control my attitude, my perspective, whether I was going to come in and fight or I was going to be a victim. Like, I own that. And I focused on that. And at the same time, we can't control COVID. We can control what we're doing, in response. So that was 1. Second was exercise gratitude. And, you think, what's there to be grateful for when you have brain cancer? But there are people who get CNS lymphoma who don't get it in the eye first. And the only way they know about it is when the tumor in the brain is so big that it causes neurological problems and speech, cognition, balance issues, etc.
Yep.
And even if those people are cured, a lot of those things don't go back. So I was grateful for it showing up in my eye. I was grateful I was referred to Sloan Kettering, grateful I had a support system, etc. And, I gave examples of how we can be grateful for what we have, that we're, living in a country, in a place where we have resources and etc. And then the third for me was the hardest, was asking for help. And I'm typically a figure it out on my own kind of guy. I don't ask for directions. I'm like, I like puzzles. I'll figure it out on my own. And I absolutely could not do this on my own. I had to ask for rides to the hospital. I had to ask people, to help drop off food or whatever. I had to ask people to help, with my business. Like my team had to really step in, and that was the hardest thing for me. But what I realized was people want to help. If they care about you, they want to help. They just need to be told how.
Yep.
They need to be told, and you will be doing we use a Jewish term here, you'll be doing a mitzvah, like a solid to them by giving them an avenue where they can help you if they care about you. So with my Sideways Rain thing, those are my 3 takeaways that I refer back to quite a bit: is focus on what you can control, exercise gratitude, and ask for help. And those things have served me well, and I think they've served other people well.
Yeah, that's gold. I think that's something we try to do every day, and it's a muscle, right? You have to practice those things, or you'll fall out of practice and you'll fall back into a spiral of negativity, which is really easy to do when things aren't going your way. So I think that's gold, and we'll certainly be sharing that clip, Howard, with the group. I want to do a quick lightning round. I don't know how to follow that because it's just so good, but quick lightning round with you. We'll put a bow on this because I know you have other work to do today. What's one underrated skill for new event pros to master in 2025?
Underrated is a tough word because it depends on how people rate it. But I would probably say storytelling. I would say I'll do two. Storytelling is the first, because at the end of the day, we're looking for people learn through stories. We learn through narratives. And part of the reason that, if you read the book Sapiens, which is a phenomenal read, part of the way that the human race evolved the way it did is through shared narratives, through a shared narrative of religion or money. This piece of paper means what it means because we all share the story of what it means. I think being able to have a narrative and craft a narrative or a story about an event, about what the event does, about your role, being able to explain why it's better to let you handle this in-house as a dedicated event professional versus an occasional event professional. What this event does, what's the narrative behind it. And I think, going back to the ROI example, you can have all the data in the world, but if you don't have a story behind it, it doesn't help people remember it.
Yep.
Right? And so I did a session on data and ROI a couple of years ago, and when I started it, I put up a picture of there's a guy named Abraham. I forget his last name, but in World War II, we tapped some mathematician to work with the Air Force. And the goal was to use data to figure out where planes needed to be reinforced to survive being attacked. And I put up a picture, and I can send it to you, but there's a silhouette of a bomber. And there are little holes in the silhouette where the planes got hit. Okay, so these are the planes that returned from bombing runs, and you could see the pockets of where the bullets were. And the initial practice had been to reinforce those areas that took bullets. And what this mathematician said is, well, we're using survivorship bias because we're not factoring in all the planes that didn't survive. And the truth is, if you had these bullet holes here, it means you can survive. So we need to reinforce the other areas, the areas that did not get hit, because that means that other bombers, when they were hit there, they crashed and they didn't make it. So I put this up there and I said, knowing what the right data is really important. And so as we go through this presentation, we're going to talk about why certain data matters and why other data matters. And that story with the plane got their attention, and that helped them, understand it. There are people who've done really good work in terms of how to bring numbers to life. If you're going to say, 30% of audience, said blah, blah, blah. Instead, you go and you say, look to your left, look to your right, one of you, blah, 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 and they personalize it. So I think storytelling is an important one. But the other skill I would say, and obviously people need to really get, up to speed on AI. I mean, that kind of goes without question, but I don't think that's underrated. I think being flexible, malleable, and agile in pivoting to different areas, because the pace of disruption is only accelerating, and the pace of change is only accelerating. And 2 years ago, computer science was your ticket, right? You studied coding in college, and that was the best guarantee to get a job. AI, not so more. What do you do? I mean, you got to figure out how to repurpose and pivot and how to adapt. And I think having that skill, that resilience, but also the ability to think differently about how to repurpose your skills is very important. So I would say those are probably two. I know I'm talking too much for a lightning round, but those are two examples.
I'd love that image.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and the storytelling was on full display there. So thanks for that. I want to wrap it up with one last question, and it's a perfect segue because it was about AI. I'd love to know, is AI here to stay in the events industry from your perspective, or is it a phase that's going to come and go like we've seen in the past in the events industry?
Well, I think it's here. I think it's 100% here, and it's evolving. The AI we have today is the dumbest AI will ever be. Right? It's only getting faster, better, smarter, easier to use, and the amount of money being put into this is unbelievable. And I use it every day, and I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. It's a matter of time before the pressure starts, filtering down for people to be more productive with AI, to be able to do more with less, to be able to be more efficient, to be faster, you think about all of the day-to-day tasks that people do. And, AI has, it's like a force multiplier, like we've never seen. Right now I think the early gains are where it's just getting embedded into other tools, right? So, if you go on a website, like a news website, and you look at an article at the very top, there are AI prompts for summary questions. I was working with a client the other day, and they sent me a non-disclosure agreement, and I know you need to use lawyers, but I could copy it, upload it to ChatGPT, and say, how does this compare to the other 5, NDAs that I've been sent? Mm-hmm. What are what areas do you want to flag? The speed with which you can work now, and I think we're barely scratching the surface. I think it's 100% gonna be there. Is it gonna live up to the hype it currently has? That I don't know. If it doesn't, we're looking at a major market recession because the market's significantly padded with AI excitement.
Yep.
But it's here. It's not going back, like it or not. And I'll tell you, people say, "Oh, AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI will take it." AI is taking people's jobs. Full stop.
Sure.
That's just a matter of time and context.
Yep. Yeah, I'll just say AI is a big reason we can do this podcast, the ability to create outlines and do deep research and help me put together summaries based on transcripts and just get this done in an efficient way that I couldn't do from scratch. Just sort of makes this all happen. So yeah, I think it speeds things up, warp speed.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Howard, it's incredible having you on the show. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of your knowledge, and we could go on for hours, but we won't do that to you. Hang out for 30 seconds, though. I want to chat with you. Chris and I are going to close, and then we can send you on your way.
Chris,
good.
This is fun, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks you
for joining.
Great episode. A lot to unpack there. ROI, experience design, perspective building, and looking forward to the next episode. We got to find a guest. I got a few lined up after that, but we have an open week next week, so it might be just you and me.
Yeah, no, sounds good. And what an episode. Great to have Howard on. And yeah, until next time, thanks for listening.
Clock hits 0, back to baseline. Set the goals, draw the chalk line. Build the thing, then test the claim. No vanity stats, just signal, not fame. Missed a mark, we don't fold, iterate, turn and stumble into shipping weight.